Tenant advocates say that rents and evictions are increasing, skyrocketing, in fact, across the entire nation. And what their solution is rental assistance forever. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's a topic that I have covered before. I've mentioned before that tenant advocates and these activists and a lot of tenants themselves are pushing for permanent rental assistance. Okay, that's what they want. They want the government to pay people's rent forever. And I think it's ridiculous, okay? They already have programs like Section 8 in place for, the very low income tenants to give them some sort of assistance, right? But that isn't good enough, okay? They want people who wouldn't normally qualify for something like Section 8 to basically have their rent paid for them by the government as well. And what does it mean when we say, hey, the government is going to pay for it? Well, that means that you and I, those people who pay the taxes, are going to be paying the rent for other people. So we're going to be paying just a ton of money so that other people can live for free. Now, does that sound like a good idea to you? People who are, by the way, capable of paying their own rent, and they are working and they just have maybe fallen into a hard time. No, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm sorry, I just don't, okay? That discourages people from working hard. It discourages, all the problems with Section 8, the rental assistance program is going to have the exact same issues, okay? When you put the government in there as, acting as the mom and dad who will have your back in case, you aren't able to pay your bills, well, a lot of people are going to just say, well, then I'm not going to work very hard. I'm not going to do anything because government will take care of me. I'll be just fine. And what that'll end up being is our taxes will continue to increase while there'll be a huge number of people and a growing number of people who are completely dependent upon the government. I don't like that. Okay, I am against socialism. I am 100% against it. So don't think for 1 second that I am going to, think that this is a good idea. I think permanent rental assistance is slippery slope down into socialism, and that's why I am opposed to it. And not only that, but I think it's bad for landlords because it makes landlords dependent on the government as well. We are dependent on the government money, and then we have to jump through the government hoops in order to get paid. Now, that's already an issue with Section 8. And I'm not saying that landlords can't make excellent money off of Section 8, right? I have Section 8 tenants. Now, do they make up the majority? Not even close. Okay? They make up less than 10% of all my tenants. But, I understand there are some landlords that are 100% Section 8 or 100% under these government programs, and the government has complete control of your business when you're doing that. And I don't think that's a good idea. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. As a landlord, do you believe that these permanent rental assistance programs are a good idea? Okay, now, I realize that I might have a differing opinion than other landlords. So I'm a smaller landlord. I'm not one of these big landlords, these mega corporations who know how to jump through all the government hoops and know how to, deal with these programs and really make a whole ton of money. And those people who do, more power to you, because I have no problem with you, right? I'm just saying the way I like to run my business and the way I like to do things, I like a little bit more control than when the government is dictating everything you do. Now, I know because I have Section 8 tenants, all the hoops and all the garbage I have to deal with in order to get paid from the government. And I'm glad that less than 10% of my tenants are Section 8 and that the majority of my tenants are regular tenants that I can, get paid from. Okay, so I am certainly not a person who wants to deal with only that sort of thing, but I could see it becoming an issue where, hey, in the future, because you have to deal with rental assistance all the time, or because you basically have to comply with all the same terms as you would a regular Section 8 tenant. So I could see the programs maybe in the future combining or becoming one and the same. So we'll see what happens, but I am not a fan of it. I don't think it's a good idea, and if anything, if it was a temporary program at most, I might agree with it a little bit more. But these programs, they've been put in place where they're essentially permanent. So what you end up with is you end up with people who've been on Section 8 for 20, 30, 40 years. Okay, how does that happen? How does it happen that somebody who is, fully capable of working and, able to take care of themselves is on Section 8 for 40 years? I mean, their financial situation never improved in all that time. For normal people, yeah, you have ups and downs. Maybe your financial situation when you're younger is bad, but when you get older, it gets better. Maybe after your kids move out of the house, you're doing better. You're not always in poverty, for normal people. Now, there are some, different cases, but not here in the U.S. That's not very common. What it leads me to believe is that a lot of people, they realize, hey, I've got a good thing. I've got basically free housing here provided by the government, and I am going to not improve my financial situation on purpose so that I can continue to get it. But that's just what I believe. Let me get into the article because I'm already on a rant. Okay, this article is coming from thehill.com, and it says, rents and evictions are skyrocketing. We need national housing security. And, it's not just about permanent rental assistance. They want eviction protections as well. They want programs put into place to give lawyers to tenants, for during the eviction process. But let's get into the article and see what it says. In the midterm elections, local governments from California to Florida passed a range of housing measures, including rent stabilization and significant investment in affordable housing in response to continuing inflation and a surge in rent prices nationwide. While these measures will provide significant relief and address housing security in many communities, they don't go far enough to address the eviction crisis. Over 3.6 million eviction cases were filed in 2018. After declining early on in the pandemic, evictions have steadily increased and returned to pre-pandemic levels. Consider the following numbers. And they start going over numbers here, right? And so they seem surprised. Well, why did evictions go back up to the pre-pandemic levels? I was, well, things are back to normal, okay? That means that, the crisis or whatever was going on during COVID times is over. People are going back to work. They don't need these eviction protections anymore. And landlords are finally able to file those evictions and get those non-paying tenants out of their units. Did you expect anything different? Did you expect landlords after the pandemic was over to be like, you know what, I'm just going to let these non-paying tenants stay here out of the goodness of my heart. I don't need my money. No, they're not stupid. That was bound to happen, okay? And it just blows my mind that they want to implement all these ridiculous new programs out there. They don't ever talk about how are we going to pay for these programs. They don't ever talk about that sort of thing. They don't ever talk about an end date to these programs either, Like, hey, we're going to work to help you get back on your feet, but you're not going to be able to stay on rental assistance forever. I mean, that is my gripe with all these socialist programs. So let me skip down in the article a bit because it's kind of long, and it talks about what exactly that they plan on doing or what exactly they want to do, these advocates, right? And it says, at a recent White House summit in August, the Biden administration highlighted eviction diversion initiatives in Michigan, Indiana, New Mexico, Texas, and legal aid and right to counsel programs in Chicago, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Cleveland, and New Orleans. While these are significant measures, they still constitute a temporary and incomplete patchwork of policies that do not reach all Americans, as many state and local governments are doing little to protect renters as rents soar and eviction filings skyrocket. We saw a glimpse of the possibility of federal power to address systemic crises during the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic highlighted the day-to-day precarity that millions of Americans have been dealing with for decades. But at the same time, the pandemic also highlighted the weaknesses and shortcomings of our federal system and the temporary and limited nature of the national response to the eviction crisis during the pandemic. It's time for Congress to enact a National Housing Security Act to stabilize housing markets and communities. The act would codify legal rights and protections for tenants and eviction diversion policies that have been enacted in 31 states and 67 localities. This would include codification of a right to counsel for tenants, and pauses on eviction processes for rental assistance applicants. These policies have significantly reduced the number of evictions in cities like San Francisco, New York, and Cleveland. So, yeah, we'll take Cleveland out of it, right? Because Cleveland is a pretty landlord friendly place from what I've heard, okay? But when we're talking about San Francisco and New York, okay, these places are places that are very, very difficult to evict tenants in, okay? So you do not want to put the same policies in place anywhere else that are in place in San Francisco and New York unless you want to destroy the rental property market, make rent prices skyrocket, and make it very difficult for landlords to do their business, okay? And when landlords can't do their business easily and cheaply, that reflects on the rental market, which is why it is so hard for tenants in those places to find affordable places to live. That's why I just don't get why they want to even implement this sort of stuff. They're talking about having to put in place eviction diversion policies, and they're like, oh, we're going to have eviction diversion and mediation and all this crap to try to stop evictions, right? And the only thing it does is it extends the process, makes the process longer. And I can't stand that sort of stuff, okay? I personally would tell my tenant, hey, if you leave, I will not file. If you can't pay the rent and you leave willingly, I will not, go through with the eviction. I've done that before, okay? Now, I've still had to file the eviction, but the tenant ended up leaving before they had an eviction on their record. Now, the filing is still on their record, but that's actually a good thing too, because the next landlord will see, hey, this tenant doesn't like to pay their rent. Okay, but I don't need to go to mediation in order to figure that sort of thing out or to negotiate that sort of thing with my tenant. Okay, the only thing I need to do is just tell my tenant that. Okay, and in terms of getting lawyers and such for tenants, there's no fighting a lot of these eviction cases. The case is over non-payment of rent in 9 out of 10 cases. Okay, what is there to fight? What are we? Oh, well, they didn't file the paperwork correctly. Yeah, okay, we didn't file the paperwork correctly. Now we did. Okay, and they still haven't paid the rent. So you still got to go. Okay, the argument is the same regardless. The tenant, there's nothing to argue. The landlords are not evicting people just because they just don't like them. They're evicting them 9 out of 10 cases for not paying the rent. So yeah, it blows my mind that these tenant advocates are, just so naive, so stupid, and they're these poor, helpless tenants. Well, the tenants put themselves into these situations in 9 out of 10 cases, okay? And if they just worked with the landlord, or if they just got off of their butts and if you ain't got a job, if you ain't got a rent, you need to go somewhere else and either get a job that pays you so you can pay your rent, or move on to somewhere that you can't afford. Not in my building, okay? So permanent rental assistance, don't agree with it. Eviction protections for tenants, don't agree with it. Free lawyers for tenants, don't agree with it. But this is the kind of stuff they're trying to push nationwide. And, you'll see it in places, where I invest in the Kansas City area, they now have free lawyers for tenants, and I might have to deal with that at some point. But for now, I've been lucky and haven't had to deal with it yet. But, man, I'm not looking forward to that.